Where are they getting all of these handkerchief head coon house Negroes from? Ever since Trump has come on the scene, more and more of these self-hating Negroes, and I'm being polite because I damn sure want to call them something else, but more and more of these Negroes are surfacing, and they've always been there, but I guess Donald Trump has basically given the white supremacist license, because I'm going to do a video on them shortly, and how they're are now holding press conferences espousing their views for mainstream media. But in this particular video, Sean P. Jackson is going to espouse support and defense for Donald Trump. Now, this is the same guy that they would not even allow into a Trump rally down in Florida. Same guy, okay? He's going to sit up here and try to spew a bunch of bullshit, and Joy is not going to let him get away with it. Let me play the clip.
On Friday, we all played a game of two truths and a lie with Donald Trump, except in this case, it was two lies and a truth. Trump arrived at his brand new Washington hotel for what was billed as a news conference to make a major statement about the birther claims that Trump has continued to make every year since President Obama released his birth certificate in 2011. After spending about a half hour promoting his hotel, essentially rickrolling the press, then bringing up a group of veterans to praise him, basically a campaign infomercial that he didn't pay for, Trump closed with this 37-second statement.
Hillary Clinton and her campaign of 2008 started the birther controversy. I finished it. You know what I mean. President Barack Obama was born in the United States, period.
Now, you win if you've been paying attention for the last 8 years of President Obama's 2 terms in office, because you are well aware which one of those statements is the truth. Trump's other 2 statements are, quite simply, lies. Let's start with his first lie, a widely discredited talking point among Trump surrogates that birtherism originated with Hillary Clinton and her 2008 presidential campaign. In fact, the earliest reported instance of misstatement from a public figure about President Obama's origins can be traced back to 2004, after he first reached national prominence at the Democratic National Convention that year. Our very own Chris Hayes tracked down the source of that claim in a 2007 piece for The Nation. A Republican Senate candidate named Andy Martin, who announced a press conference saying he would expose then-Senator Obama for having, quote, lied to the American people and, quote, misrepresented his own heritage. You may also have heard some Trump supporters reference a secret memo that supposedly exposes the truth about the Clinton campaign's ties to birtherism. The document they're referring to, it's not a secret at all, you can actually just Google it, is this, a 2007 internal strategy memo from Clinton pollster Mark Penn, in which he writes of her opponent, quote, all of these articles about his boyhood in Indonesia and his life in Hawaii are geared towards showing his background as diverse, multicultural, and putting it in a new light. It also exposes a very strong weakness for him. His roots to basic American values and culture are at best limited, unquote. That's it. No attempt to question President Obama's citizenship or his birthplace. No smoking gun. In fact, Penn goes on to advise a strategy that highlights Clinton's middle American values and warns that the campaign is, quote, never going to say anything about Senator Obama's background, unquote. As for Trump's second claim that he finished the birther controversy, any lingering questions about the president's birthplace were answered 8 years ago by President Obama when he released his birth certificate, the first time in June of 2008, and again when he released the long-form version in April of 2011, an unprecedented act for a sitting American president. The truth is, the only controversy that Trump attempted to finish on Friday was the one that he himself created when he began leading the charge on the birther conspiracy theory in the first place. And joining me now are NBC's Katie Tur Sean P. Jackson, chairman of the Black Republican Caucus of Florida, and MSNBC contributor Teray. Thank you all for being here. And Sean, I want to start with you because you're in Florida, where Donald Trump was yesterday after he did this publicity stunt with the 7-second debirtherization of himself. Do you believe that Donald Trump would help himself, particularly with African Americans, if he now simply apologized to the President of the United States for his birtherism?
Well, you know what, in all honesty, there's no need for Mr. Trump to apologize. Mr. Trump 5 years ago was a private citizen when he gave his opinion on what he felt was or was not the case as it pertained to President Obama and his birther or birth certificate or whatever you want to call it.
See, and that's what gets me about these assholes. He's talking about Donald Trump being a private citizen when he gave those comments. But Trump is always spouting how he was against the Iraqi war and various other things that he did. He was a private citizen then. So why do you give more credence to certain things or certain statements that Donald Trump made as a private citizen, but you don't want to give credence to this statement? See, it's a double standard, but that's what you expect from somebody that's a house Negro defending their master.
If you do go back to the beginning of Mrs. Clinton's then 2008 presidential campaign, you will in fact see that Mrs. Clinton did insinuate.
When did she do that? Give us a quote or a reference to exactly specifically when Hillary Clinton ever insinuated birtherism.
Anyone can go to an article, or I'm sorry, not an article, but a television interview and see that she.
No, you can't.
Insinuated.
Yes, you can.
PolitiFact
looked at this. But let me go to an article. Sean.
All right, now the video that he's referencing, okay, was an interview that Clinton did, and where the interviewer, and I forget his name, asked her whether Barack Obama was a Muslim. And she basically said he wasn't, but it was a lukewarm denial. She said that he wasn't a Muslim as far as she knew, which in my opinion was lukewarm, and that's what led to Barack Obama facing off with her and yelling at her on a tarmac, where both their planes happened to be at the time. And yeah, he went up one side of her and down the other as far as that last bit, as far as I know, comment was concerned. That's what this asshole is referring to. So he doesn't even know what the hell he's talking about.
Actually, you can, because PolitiFact did the work on this. They actually bothered to go back and look at interviews and look for evidence of this. It isn't true. Let me go.
It is true.
No, actually, you just can't assert things are true because you want them to be true. They actually have to be true in fact. Let me go to an article from the New York Times.
She said that she did not know if Mr. Obama was or was not a Muslim.
No, she didn't. No, that's not true. A Muslim, no, it's not true. All right, we don't have to agree to disagree because a fact is a fact, and we don't just agree to disagree on a fact.
See, that's why I love Joy, because she doesn't let these assholes try to worm their way out of stuff. That agree to disagree was a bunch of bullshit. The fact is the fact, and she was going to let him try to worm his way in.
You just asserted something that isn't true, Sean. I'm going to read an article from the New York Times, July 2nd. Facts are not unfair or fair, they're just facts. On July 2nd, and it's called Inside the 6 Weeks Donald Trump Was a Nonstop Birther. It's very interesting. It says that in 2011, early 2011, Donald J. Trump, you said was a private citizen at the time, told Mr. Farron, this is a guy who runs WorldNet Daily, that he shared his suspicion that President Obama might have been born outside the United States, and that he was looking for a way to prove it. He said, we can get to the bottom of this. What can we do to get to the bottom of this? He said that he'd like to actually send investigators to Hawaii. There was a former aide to Donald Trump who talks about the fact that he participated in using this as a way to launch Donald Trump's political career. So his name is Sam Nunberg. He was just on TV last night with Chris Hayes. And Sam Nunberg says, this is from the same article, the appeal to the birther issue was, I'm going to take this guy on and I'm going to beat him, said Sam Nunberg, who was one of Trump's advisors during that period, but was fired from the current campaign. It was a great nation wedge issue. So really quickly, one time again to you, Sean. Sam Nunberg has admitted that they used this issue to create a political platform for Donald Trump. Donald Trump affirmatively went to the guy who publishes WorldNet Daily and said he'd like to look into this. He did it specifically to launch his political career. So it wasn't just being a private citizen. So I'll ask you again, would it be helpful to him if at this point he simply apologized for having done that?
Well, with all due respect, I don't particularly speak for Sam Nunberg or for the Trump campaign, but I don't think that Mr. Trump, if he was going to contemplate the thought of running for president, would have done so by insinuating that Mr. Obama was or was not.
His own aide said he did. His own aide
former
said he
aide,
did.
and there's a reason why Mr. Nunberg was fired. That reason, I don't know, but...
See, and that's what these assholes do. He just said there's a reason why he was fired, okay? That had nothing to do with this birther thing, apparently. But he also said he doesn't know why he was fired. Okay, so now he's trying to tie the two things together, that Mr. Nunberg basically was wrong and that he was fired for being wrong. And since we're talking about this subject, he's trying to cast aspersions on Nunberg and anything that he says. No, that doesn't work.
Maybe this is part of that reason for insinuating such a false.
All right, Teray, I'm going to go to you on this. Teray, just yesterday, and I'm, with all due respect to Sean, he is a surrogate for Donald Trump, but Sam Nunberg knows Donald Trump quite well. He worked for him. I want to play another person who knows Donald Trump. I'm presuming better than Sean does. His name is Roger Stone. He's a longtime advisor to Donald Trump. And this is what he just said on one of Donald Trump's other favorite haunts for finding quote-unquote news, InfoWars, Alex Jones' show. He just said this, Roger Stone, yesterday on InfoWars. Let's play Roger Stone.
It's just like the birther question. Trump fearlessly brought that into the mainstream. Trump is the guy who brought the whole question of Obama's birth and where he was really born into the political mainstream where people could consider it.
It's interesting that he calls.
Okay, in case you guys don't know anything about InfoWars, InfoWars is a conspiracy theory website, okay? Their latest or last major conspiracy theory that didn't pan out was that the government was getting ready to do a major takeover, and they were going to camouflage it underneath a military operation called Jade Helm 15. Okay, that was the government was supposed to be carrying out joint exercises, okay, throughout the country, primarily in Florida, Mississippi, Alabama, Texas, Oklahoma, and I believe Utah, but I might be mistaken on that. It was supposed to be, again, military exercises, but as those exercises were going on, there was supposed to be a massive takeover of the country, and everybody was jumping up and down about Jade Helm this, Jade Helm that. Well, it was to take place July the 15th, and since this video is being done in September, I don't think that came to pass. Another thing that InfoWars, and I don't recall the name of the guy that's associated with it. I'll probably think of it as I'm giving you this information. He was talking about there was going to be a massive roundup, and there were FEMA camps all over the place, and the government was going to do a takeover, and they were going to house like all of these people in all of these various FEMA camps. A bunch of them were located in Texas. Well, I went down myself to look at the quote-unquote FEMA detention camp locations, and honestly, I went past 2 of them, and that was the biggest load of bullshit that you ever wanted to see. Another one of those InfoWar deals was that there were ISIS camps just 10 miles across the Texas Mexican border. Me being me, I had to go see. I drove down there. I'm looking around. My Spanish is shaky, but I did talk to a couple of people. And when, I told them, where, I asked them, where are the ISIS camps down here? And they started laughing at me and said that I had been listening to InfoWars. So InfoWars is bullshit. All right, let's continue. But that's just a little background on InfoWars.
Trump. He's the only one who's in that group who calls him Trump and not the other. But I hear Sean taking this as a game, which makes it really disgusting, because this is a very serious issue. Black people have for centuries in this country felt like outsiders, right?
Okay, real quick. The guy on InfoWars, the guy that runs it, is Alex Jones. It just hit me.
Because of all the things that have been done to us in this country. This was the country on a hill that had moral standing above everyone else, and every other country was able to say, well, what about the way you treat blacks? And this country was like, well, we don't have an answer for that. And the election of Barack Obama was, for many people, a sort of watershed moment where finally we feel like we are fully part of the country. We are not second-class citizens. And to have this gadfly go up to the president and say, I want to see your papers, boy, was like this moment, like even a black president is still beneath any white person who wants to allege you're not really American. And to say you're not really American when an American can be almost anything is so deeply offensive. This was incredibly hurtful and painful for a lot of us that changed the election of Obama to this argument of like, well, can we prove that he's actually American, and these questions that never end, even though, people were tweeting me that they cried when Obama showed his birth certificate, and it seemed like this sort of defeated moment of like, I finally have to show my papers to this fool who's been pulling racial rank for years of saying, any white person can say, I want to see your papers, boy. This is not a game. This is deeply painful and hurtful and offensive. And for Donald Trump to think he can just walk up to the mic and say, never mind, okay, thanks, bye. Like, no. And for people like Sean to think, like, this is a game where I can be like, well, no, he doesn't need to apologize because it's actually Hillary. Is he not a man to do his own business? Like, Hillary started it, so I'm following her. When does he ever follow her with anything? Why don't you own up to what you did and the pain? He wasn't just talking to Obama. He was also talking to you and saying, you too, Sean, are not really American, and that you can't hear that is sort of insane.
Excuse me, sir, you are part of the ugly discourse of politics, because to sit there and blatantly say that Mr. Trump is racist because
I can sit there and say that Donald Trump, that motherfucker, is a racist. I'll say it to your face if I ever run into you. He's a goddamn racist.
For someone to show their birth certificate, let me tell you something.
Yes,
don't you dare talk about Black America and their well-being in this country, because it was Republicans that, if we were not for the Republican Party, we would not even be free right now.
Okay, Sean,
see, now here we go. They always want to roll back to Abraham Lincoln was a Republican, and it was the Republicans that were pushing for freeing the slaves. It absolutely is true. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. But the Republican Party of today is not that same Republican Party, okay? Strom Thurmond took the Dixiecrats, which were Democrats, which were pro-slavery or pro-discrimination in the 1960s. He took all of the Dixiecrats after LBJ passed the Voting Rights Act and the Fair Housing Act and various other civil rights acts. Strom Thurmond, who was a Democrat, took all of those damn Dixiecrats and pulled them over into the Republican Party, and it created a major shift in the Republican Party into what it is today. So for this asshole to talk about Republicans back then like they're the same Republicans as they are today, that is a load of bullshit, and I get tired of hearing these guys say that, and he in particular is pissing me off.
Abraham Lincoln is long dead. Let's talk about the current Republican nominee. Sean, one moment. I want to get
and we have civil rights because of Republicans. So please.
That's bullshit. The majority of the people that voted for all of those civil rights acts were Democrats. Yeah, there were some Republicans that got on board, but they were Democrats. LBJ twisted arms like you wouldn't believe on those Southern Dixiecrats in order to get those Southern Democrats to vote for it. But if you go back and look for yourself, the majority of the votes for the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, and also for the Fair Housing Act, they were Democratic votes.
African Americans have civil rights is because African Americans fought for them. Thank you very much for giving
and Republicans are the ones that passed it when Democrats continually turned it down. Let's tell the truth now. Let's tell the truth. It is the truth. All you have to do is go back and look.
This guy is lying. He's just getting ready to say all you got to do is go back and look. I invite everybody that's watching this to go back and look and see what the actual voting records show. He's a liar.
Google exists. History is easily accessible. Let's go to Katie Turk.
Wow.
Katie, let's talk about the way that this plays out in the actual campaign. You're actually out there on the campaign trail dealing with the people who attend Donald Trump rallies. Does birtherism still matter to Trump supporters as you've been able to see it?
It has mattered to Trump supporters, and he frankly used it, and he made it announced that he was using birtherism to start his presidential campaign or to fuel his presidential campaign. But that base of support was there from the beginning, and partly because Donald Trump did lead the birther movement. When you talk to a number of Donald Trump supporters, when you go across the country like I have, speaking on a daily basis with them, not just a small amount of them, but quite a few of them do express this idea that they don't believe the president of this country is on the side of what they call regular Americans with Western values. They'll say they don't like the direction of this country, and not just because they don't like the direction of where the economy is going. They will say they think this president is trying to not enhance Western values. And when you ask them what they mean by that, it's certainly not that they think that he's trying to further Chinese values or Japanese values. They will say Middle Eastern values, potentially Sharia law in some cases. And at these rallies, when Donald Trump mentions President Obama's name, you do hear resounding boos, which is normal for a political rally. What is not normal for a political rally is that you hear people scream out, President Obama is a Muslim. So this is not something that is unusual for this campaign. It's not something that he is not benefiting from. Where does he go from here with this, having now, in his words, put the issue, or in the campaign's words, put the issue to rest? Well, his supporters are falling into two camps from what we can see so far. One camp says that whatever Donald Trump says is true, and that's fine, and I'll believe him. The other camp says he was just forced to say this because he's running for office, and the liberal media and the Democrats are forcing him to say something that he doesn't really believe, but we know that he knows the truth.
Yeah, and to that point, to Katie's point, yesterday during this sort of bizarre press availability, Thomas McInerney, who is a retired general, was a part of that press conference, or whatever we want to call that event that Donald Trump held in D.C. He, back in 2010, supported a military officer who was actually refusing to serve under President Obama, saying his orders were unlawful. He filed an affidavit at David that says, quote, it acknowledges concerns about Obama's constitutional eligibility and demands that he release his birth certificates or that the court authorize discovery. A second issue, Donald Trump actually questioned not just President Obama's citizenship and eligibility, but he also questioned his Harvard degree. An excerpt from that, and I'm going to come back to you on this, Teray. I heard he was a terrible student. Terrible. How does a bad student go to Columbia and then to Harvard? Trump said in an interview with the Associated Press. I'm thinking about it. I'm certainly looking into it. Let him show his records. So this went beyond just questioning the president's citizenship. It also went to his education, to his very profile.
You know, so much of the discussion around modern racism comes to, if you are poor, then you're in the belly of the beast. But if you're middle class, or the very few black people who are upper class, well, you don't deal with racism anymore. But this is the sort of upper class racism that people who are not stuck in poverty are seeing, that people are questioning you. Do you have the right to be a doctor? Do you have the right to be a lawyer? You're black, so I question your legitimacy to be here at Harvard or Yale or Goldman Sachs or wherever. These are not questions that white people have to deal with. And Trump took this to a national 2.0 level by doing it to the president. But the other thing, though, is that I think yesterday was probably the biggest PR mistake that this campaign has made since the Khan family saga. This feels like a Kellyanne Conway thing. It feels like it was sort of this multi-group thing of how do we do this? But the way that they did it was so ham-fisted and so problematic. It only raises more questions by starting with the lie about Hillary, right? So media comes out, media says he lied first off, right? And then saying I finished it, which is a challenge to media, where media's like, oh no, you did it. And the way he did it, where he played media into creating this infomercial for the hotel and him with the Medal of Honor winners.
Yep.
I mean, you know, media's like, oh no, it's not over. You have made us look like fools.
Yeah, and before we go, and I think that's a good point, and I think the next person who talks to Donald Trump really is going to have to follow up on this and not be able to let it go. But I want to turn really quickly to one other thing before we get lose Sean here. Donald Trump did say the other night, and this was at his big event in Florida last night in Miami, where he made the following comments about Hillary Clinton's support for gun reform.
I think what we should do is she goes around with armed bodyguards like you have never seen before. I think that her bodyguards should drop all weapons. They should disarm. Right? I think they should disarm. Let's see what happens to them. Take their guns away. Okay? It'd be very dangerous.
All right, now this is the second time that Trump has made a reference to the safety of Hillary Clinton. The first time is going to be referenced later on in this video, and I'll give you a quick heads up. It was in regard to the Second Amendment people doing something about Hillary Clinton before if she wins. Okay, doing something about Hillary Clinton if she wins before she is able to nominate and get appointed Supreme Court justices. Let me just be clear about that. All right, here we go.
Sean, that really does sound it's sort of like an assassination reference. Do you have a problem with that?
Look, the reality of the fact is that Mrs. Clinton just sat here just last week and called all Trump supporters deplorables.
That's a lie. That is another absolute lie. The original comment was that half of Trump's supporters are in the deplorable basket, okay? And then she later walked it back. But the original quote was half, not all. That is a lie. Mr. Jackson, you are doing nothing but lying all over this particular segment.
Insinuating that that everyone who supports
But what about
Donald
the question
Trump
that I just asked you? Just listen.
No, because if
I need you to
play tit
answer.
for
We don't
tat,
have endless time.
if
Do
you're gonna
you
play
find
tit
it
for tat, it's only
problematic for
fair.
Donald Trump to make a
I
reference
find
to what
it-
sounds like assassination?
I find it very problematic that the first black president of the United States of America has not done anything for gun reform.
Okay, you don't want to
in
answer
his
my
own
question.
city of
We are out of
Chicago. And
time.
I
Very
find
quickly
that Mrs.
before we go,
Clinton
Katie Tur, before we go, does the campaign have a concern that rather than putting the birtherism issue to bed, that they simply reopened it? And have you heard any concerns from the campaign about the remarks that we just heard regarding what sounds like assassination?
I don't know about whether they're concerned about reopening the birther issue. There was a need in the campaign, they felt, to put this issue to rest before the first debate. As for the Second Amendment comments and the disarming her Secret Service, I got an email from Jason Miller, the communications director, this morning saying that he was not inciting violence. I went back to him and asked him what Donald Trump was insinuating there then, especially given the Second Amendment people making sure that she doesn't appoint Supreme Court justices. What exactly is Donald Trump implying here? And so far, he's not gotten back to me.
All right, NBC's Katie Tur, thank you very much. Sean P. Jackson, thank you. Tur will be back later in the show. Next.
Sean P. Jackson, you are a house nigger. And yeah, I did say it. I hate that word, but in this particular context, It is appropriate. You got your head slapped when you attempted to go into a Trump rally. You told them who you were, and they slapped your ass anyway. And that was widely reported. But just like a good dog, you're coming back for more. You have to defend your master, even though your master is kicking your ass, spitting in your face, and shitting in your food. No respect for this guy whatsoever. None. Zero.